Got some lovely mushrooms. Okay, to make a mushroomy omelette. Well, last night was so interesting. I was on the swinging bed and it wasn't supposed to rain last night much, but it poured down, and that piece of plastic just kept me completely dry. It was cold. I just had my nose sticking out from under the blankets, and some mosquito or something bit it. It felt quite numb in the morning. But what a delightful stealth camp that was. I got up at sunset yesterday and watched the moon rise. There were clouds, so it was only at a certain time that I could show and see the moon rising, but what a beautiful full moon there was. So brought back such wonderful memories. Let's put an egg or two on here to get this omelette going. So this is just an egg and mushrooms with garlic. And let's throw in a bit of cheese. And let that cook away. So as I say, I watched the full moon, and it's quite interesting that God's feasts are kept on the night of the full moon. But it's also interesting that there's no definition in the Bible of when a month begins, which is on the new moon. Is it the sighted new moon, or is it the astronomical new moon, which is an invisible new moon? And it's actually quite hard to define when is the full moon, because there are at least two nights when the moon looks full. So which one is the full moon? So I always take the night when the moon rises after sunset. And my late wife and I were both very interested in moons. We used to go down, we lived on the beach facing east, and on the full moon night we would go and walk on the beach and watch the full moon rising above the sea, especially on the feast nights, to know when the Feast of Stealth Camping or Tabernacles began, and also when Passover, for example, the Feast of Unleavened Bread began. So it brought back very pleasant memories of my late wife, how we used to talk about the moons. Now, I learned a lot about the moon from her, and she learned, I think, something from me. For example, if you want to know when the new moon is going to occur, because it's invisible, what you do is you get up at dawn a few days before the new moon, and you watch every day. The new moon gets smaller and smaller and smaller and rises closer and closer to sunset. And if you stretch your arm out like this, the moon gets closer and closer to sunset by one hand span every day. And then you can see when the moon is just a tiny little crescent, and you can just see it before sunrise, you know that the next day is going to be, if it's one hand above the horizon, you can know that the next day is going to be the new moon. So she learned how to tell the new moon by that method. And I thought it was quite interesting. So she could tell when was the new moon, with even though it was invisible, by the way it changed its rising in the time just before it became the astronomical new moon. Anyway, I'm sure that's all very uninteresting to you, but we used to enjoy that. Got a little bit of salt here. Now, people always think, oh, it'd be nice to live a trouble-free life. And perhaps it would be. Nice to live a trouble-free life. But if you go through all the heroes of the Bible, let's start with, say, Noah. God told Noah, I've lost my fork, so I'm going to have to use this. Is there a fork somewhere around? Can't see one. God told Noah, you've got 120 years and then there's going to be a worldwide flood. You better make this boat. Save your family, yourself, and all the animals. I mean, 120 years to build this massive wooden boat. God could have said, look, God, the animals are innocent. Can't you just send a plague to wipe out the humans? Would it be so much easier? Then we won't have to build a boat. You just wipe out all the humans on earth, leave myself and my family, and save us 120 years of work. And that sounds perfectly logical. And then Noah wouldn't have been the hero for saving the world. What about Abram? He could have lived a trouble-free life. I mean, he could have stayed in Ur of the Chaldees where he came from. God could have blessed him there. No, but God made him camp in tents for all of his life, as well as Isaac. They were stealth campers almost. This omelette with a cheese and garlicky taste. Delicious. But anyway, Abram suffered, and Abram had to wait 25 years for his son Isaac. So that suffering made Abram a hero. And then God asked Abram to sacrifice his son Isaac, and he was prepared to. I mean, that was suffering. Can you imagine those few days walking with Isaac to Mount Moriah or wherever, and knowing that you're going to sacrifice your son? So we could go through all the heroes of the Bible, all the faith chapter of Hebrews 11. We could go to David. If King David had had an easy life, he wouldn't have had to trust in God. He wouldn't have been the hero that he is because of all the suffering he went through. So likewise, I could say God could give you and I a trouble-free life. But that would make us a zero instead of a hero. We would never have to overcome anything. We'd never have to trust in God for anything. I mean, look at Christ, God's beloved Son. He has to come to earth, suffer and die, this most terrible death. He has to live among humans, which must be a real come down from living in heaven. It's suffering. And it said he learned obedience by what he suffered. He was already obedient, but he learned to be even more obedient. So even to the perfect Christ, there was a benefit from the suffering which he endured, the having to overcome temptations, etc., and especially the temptation to avoid the cross and crucifixion. I mean, who wouldn't want to avoid crucifixion or martyrdom? But many of the very early Christians went to death in the arena, and they went with a smile, and they went voluntarily, and people could see their commitment. They could see these people have values, these people have standards, these people have something they're prepared to die for. So they were hugely impressed with Christianity. No one became a Christian if they weren't totally committed to it in the days of Nero. This is so delicious. So go through all the faith chapter of Hebrews 11, all the heroes of old, and ask yourself, without the suffering that they went through, would they have been anything? Samson suffered. He went through a lot. A lot of it was brought on by his own stupidity. But he became a hero in the process. He became a person of faith. So one would have to be careful of what one wished for. Yes, we all want a trouble-free life. But a trouble-free life makes you a zero. You cannot build faith, you cannot build muscle without lifting a weight. And you cannot build spiritual muscle without lifting spiritual weights. And spiritual weights equal suffering. So I'm not a fan of suffering at all. I'm not trying to be a spiritual bodybuilder, but I do realize the value of it. So last night, I can't even say I suffered in the rain at all. I had just my nose poking out. I thought I'd wake up in the morning and find my sleeping bag almost soaked through, but it was warm throughout the night. And the rain poured down. I think being raised in my swinging bed, normally when rain falls, it splashes onto you. But because I was on a raised swinging bed, I never even got splashed on. It was just delightful. And this is where I'm sleeping tonight. And I'm sure it's going to be absolutely just as gorgeous.